And we are back. What's up, everyone? I'm Nick. This is Swivel Thinking. In the last video, we set up this new portfolio view where users can edit, add, save, delete items from their portfolio, but we have not added any logic behind the scenes to actually save or add any of this to their portfolio. And in this video, we're going to actually add all of that logic, and we're going to do it using core data. So we're going to create yet another layer, another class in our app that is going to manage all of the core data functions that we need to be able to save, update, and delete our items. And we're using core data so that the data does persist. So that if we close our app and reopen our app, yes, we're going to be downloading new live price data from the internet, but the current user's portfolio, the number of coins that that user actually has, will still save, and that will persist.
All right, welcome back, everyone. I'm back in our Xcode project, and I have our current app open right here on a simulator, and we have the home screen looking pretty good. We can press the arrow to go to our portfolio screen, and then if we click the plus button, we go to the edit portfolio view. This is the view we made in the last video, and we now have the ability to search for a coin. I'll search for a link. When we click on a coin, we select it, we get that little green animation, and then we can see some extra info about that coin. We can see that the current price is $46 here. We can add in how many of this coin that we're holding, and then we can see the current value. So if I add in maybe 2 coins here, we can see that the current value updates in real time. And then we added some logic to click this save button, and it will dismiss the keyboard, show us that little check, and we're back to our starting state. Now the only thing left here is that when we click that save button, we're not actually saving the data. And that's what we're going to tackle in this video. But before we do, there's one quick thing that I noticed, and it's that if we are searching for a coin, so let me just search for, let's click on a coin here. If I click the save button, it dismisses the screen, which is what we want. But if I am searching a coin and I click this little X button, it actually doesn't dismiss this little section, and we want it to. And the problem is that when we click that X button, that's not being done on our portfolio view. So we can't edit the function for that little X button that shows up on the search bar. But what we will do instead is observe this search text. And if the text in the search bar becomes blank, becomes nil, then we'll just automatically remove the coin from here. So we can do that pretty simply in our portfolio view. I'm going to do it at let's do it at the bottom underneath this toolbar. Let's call .onChange. We can basically watch any value in our app, and if it changes, we can get the new value, and then we can run a function. So we're going to watch the search text, which is in our view model, our vm.searchText. And in here, we're going to very simply say if the value, which is the new value in that search text, is equal to a blank string. If it's equal to a blank string, we're going to call remove selected coin. And that's the function that we made in the last video. So if I run my app one more time, I should have added that in the last video, I just forgot. But if I run the app one more time and I navigate to that edit portfolio, and now if I click on a coin, and we click the X button, it will also dismiss this area and it will remove that selected coin. Awesome. All right, now that we have that out of the way, let's jump into core data. So just to remind you guys, this view, this edit portfolio view, is our portfolio view. And although it's a new screen, we're still using the home view model. So if I right click on that and jump into the home view model, we have all of our logic where we are like downloading all of the data for our app so far. So we have the coin data service. This is where we're getting all of our coin data. We have our market data service. This is where we're getting those the global market statistics. And all we're going to do is basically add one more service below this that's going to get our current portfolio. And the only difference is going to be that in these data services, we're getting all the coin data here, and we're getting it from an API. And the only difference is going to be that in our new class that we're going to create in this video, instead of getting it from an API, we're going to get it from core data. So same structure, just the endpoint is a little bit different. All right, so before we actually start working with core data, we need to set up a core data entity that we will be storing in core data. So we're going to do that by right-clicking in the models folder here, because the entity really is a model. We're going to create a new file, and this is going to be a data model. Under the core data section, we're clicking on data model. And I covered all of this in the SwiftUI Continued Learning playlist. So if you have not watched that playlist and you don't know what core data is or how to use it, I highly recommend watching that first and then coming on back to this. Let's click on this data model. And this is going to be the name of our container here. And I'm going to call this, let's call this portfolio container. Let's click create. And inside this container, we can then add a bunch of entities. And our entities are going to be super simple in this app. So let's just add an entity. And we're going to rename the entity. We're going to call it PortfolioEntity. And just like we do with the other models, in a production app, like the CoinModel would probably be called just coin. In a production app, this might be just called portfolio or portfolio item and not entity. But I like to specifically add the word entity at the end, just so that we know as the developer that anything with the word entity is actually a core data entity. We're going to store the coins that we have in our portfolio here, and we're actually going to only store some very basic data for each coin. We're going to store the ID, so we're going to call that coin ID. And the coin ID we're going to use from our coin model. If we look at the coin model and we go to the ID, it is a type string. So when we save it to core data, we're going to save the coin ID, and that will be of type string. And then we're going to save the amount, and this is going to be the amount of these coins that we're holding in our portfolio. And if I look at the coin model again, we have our current holdings here, and it is of type double. So that's what we're going to do in core data. We're going to save the amount as a double. All right, so that's all we're going to do in our portfolio entity. You could theoretically add maybe like all of the information from this coin if you wanted to persist all of this data. But what we're doing is just very simply adding the ID and the current holdings. And then when we open the app, since we're downloading all of this data again, we're just going to use all of the updated data. We're not going to actually save the rest of it. So we have our portfolio entity, and now we need to add some logic to obviously save and fetch these entities from our core data database. So we're going to add this in our services folder. And just to recap, the coin data service is doing all of the logic for getting coin data. The coin image data service does all the logic for getting the image data. The market data does all the logic for getting the market data. And we're going to create one more, create a new file. It's going to be a Swift file. We're going to call this portfolio data service. Click enter. And this is going to do all of the logic for getting our portfolio data. So let's create a class. Let's call it portfolio data service, and we'll open the brackets. And the only difference between this class and these other services is that these other services again are going to the API, and this one is going to be going to core data. So because we're going to core data, we have to set up core data. So let's first create our core data container. We'll say private let container of type NS persistent, and we actually don't have access to it yet because we have not yet import core data. And now this container will be of type NS persistent container. In our init of this class, let's set it up. We'll set container equal to a new NS persistent container, and we're going to use the name. And now we need a name for our container. And let's also make that a variable here. So let's say private let container name of type string, and let's set it equal to the container name is the name of the data, is the name of the container that we just set up. So it's called portfolio container that I see over here on the left in the navigation bar. So this will say portfolio container. We'll pass in this variable as the name. And then after that, we're going to call it container.loadPersistentStores. This has a completion handler that we'll press enter on. It's going to return us back the store description and an error. And we're not going to use the description, so I'm going to use an underscore. And then the error, I'll just call error. And then in here, I'll very simply say if let error equals error, open the brackets, print And let's print out here error loading core data. And then let's use the backslash open close parentheses and print out that error. All right, so this loads our container into this file. And now we need a function to fetch all of the data inside that container, because that's going to be our portfolio inside that container. So let's create a private func. Let's call it get portfolio. And we'll open close parentheses and open the brackets. And here we need to create a fetch request. So we'll say let request equals ns fetch request. Open the parentheses, and then we need an entity name. And let's also make this a variable at the top here. We'll say private let entity name of type string, and we're going to set it equal to our entity name. So in the container, we have our entity name, which is the portfolio entity. Let's add that up here, portfolio entity. Let's take the portfolio name, put it here. And we're going to get one quick error message here, and it's that this ns fetch request is generic, so we need to give it a specific result type. We do that by using the less than sign and greater than sign, and then in between those we'll add the type that we're trying to fetch, which is the portfolio entity. And this request is basically just getting all of the portfolio entities in the container. We're not doing any kind of filtering or sorting. It's just going to get them all and return them. So that's all we need. And then we're going to do a do catch statement. And then we're going to try to call this request. So here we're going to call container.viewContext.fetch. And here we can pass in a request. So we'll pass in our request. We're getting the error message here that errors are not handled. So in the catch, we will catch the errors. We'll say let error. And here, if we can't get the request, we will just print out error fetching portfolio entities. Then let's backslash open close parentheses and print out that error. We have one final notification here that the result of this call is not being used. So basically, once we get the data from this request, we want to store it somewhere. So up here, let's create an @published var. Let's call it saved entities of type array of portfolio entity, and we'll set it equal to a blank array for now. In our do statement, we'll simply set the saved entities equal to the result of this call here. So this saved entities should have all of the entities that are always saved in our core data, and it's published so that we can bind and subscribe to it from other places in our app. And this is going to work the same way as in all of our other services where we have like the altcoins, and then we are subscribing to that altcoins. And after we download the data here, we update this altcoins, and then that gets pushed into the rest of our app. This is working the exact same way. All right, and while we're here, let's add some functions to add and save to the core data as well. So we'll say private func, we'll say add. And when we go to add a coin, it is going to be coming from our app, and it's going to be coming from the home view model. And on our home view model, all of the coins that we have here are actually coin models. They're not portfolio entities. So we're going to pass in a coin model to this function, and we're going to convert it to a portfolio entity. So here we're going to pass in the coin that we're adding, which is of type coin model. And then we're going to add the amount that we're adding. So the amount, and the amount is of type double. All right, now we have to convert this coin model to the entity that we want to save. So we'll say let entity equals a portfolio entity, open the parentheses. We need to then add the context here. And the context is, of course, our container.viewContext. And then for these core data entities, we have to manually add all of the data. So our portfolio entity has an amount and a coin ID, so we need to update both of those. So here we'll say entity.coinID, and we'll set it equal to the coin.id. And then we'll say entity.amount, and we'll set it equal to our new amount. Finally, after we add this entity to the context and update the data in the entity, we need to then save the context, and that's how we update our core data. So let's create another function because we're going to reuse it. We'll say private func save, open close parentheses, open the brackets. And very simply, we're going to create a do catch statement. And in our try, we're going to try to container.viewContext.save. We'll also catch the errors here. We'll say let error, and we will print error saving to core data, / open close parentheses, print out that error. Hopefully we never actually see this printout, but we are being safe coders. After we save our core data entities, we then want to update this saved entities array so that, because this saved entities array is what's going to be actually funneling into the rest of our application. So we have two options after that. We could either update this entities array directly, or we could just reload the entire array. So if I had like thousands of items in core data, I would probably prefer to just update this entities directly. I would take the new entity and I would just append it to this array, and we would call it quits. But because our core data actually doesn't have that much data, and like I don't expect a user to have thousands of coins in their portfolio. They probably have like 10, 20, maybe 100, but not thousands of coins. So because it's not that large of a database, it's actually easier and more efficient to just call get portfolio again. And that's going to create a whole new fetch request, fetch all of the coins, and then set them to our saved entities array. And I like doing this method because this way we ensure that our saved entities is always in sync with our core data, because every time this gets updated, it's coming directly from the fetch request. Of course, if you'd prefer to just update this directly and not call get portfolio again, you can do that. But for this purpose, I think this works and it's easier. So we're going to create one more function, private func. We'll call it apply changes. Open close parentheses, open the brackets. In our apply changes, we're going to save. And after we save, let's call get portfolio again. So this way we save the new context and then we refetch all of the coins from the context and we set them into our saved entities. So in our add function, after we add our new coin, let's call apply changes. So we have our function to add coins, but let's create one more function now to update coins, because this add coins creates a new entity every time. And if we already have an entity and we just want to change the amount, we need a different function. So we'll create a private func update. And since we already have the entity, let's just pass it in. We'll say entity of type PortfolioEntity and the new amount that we are updating to. So we'll say amount of type double, open the brackets. And all we need to do is update the amount in the entity. So we'll say entity.amount equals our new amount, so that this amount is the one that we're passing in. And then we will call apply changes. And finally, we need one more private func to remove a coin from our portfolio. And if we are removing, it's already an entity in our portfolio. So we'll say entity of type PortfolioEntity. We'll open the brackets, and then here we can simply call the container.viewContext.remove or delete, and we will delete the entity. Let's actually call this delete, this function here. After we delete, we just need to apply changes one more time. And finally, we need one more function now to actually call from somewhere else in our app. So when we set up this class, we need a function that we're going to call, because these are all private, so they're only going to be accessed from within this file. So I'm going to mark these as private section. And let's create one more section here. We'll mark as public. And this will be the only function we call from somewhere else in our app. So this function is going to then determine whether we are adding, updating, or deleting the items. So in here, so up here, let's call func. Let's call it update portfolio. Open close parentheses, open the brackets. And when we call this, let's pass in the coin that we want to update, which is our CoinModel. Let's pass in the amount we are updating to, which is of type double. And the first thing we want to do here is check if whether or not this coin is already in our core data. So if we can find a coin with the same ID in our saved entities, we already have that entity in core data. And then we'll know that we don't need to add it, we need to actually update or delete it. So in here, let's call if let entity equals the saved entities dot first where. So we're looking at the saved entities array, and we're going to look for, let's press enter here. This is the saved entity. And in here, we're going to return where the first saved entity dot coin ID is equal to our coin dot ID. And then we will open the brackets. So we're looking in the saved entity for any entity in that array that has the same coin ID as the coin that we're passing in here. And I wrote this out just so you guys can understand it, but there's a shorter way to actually write this bit of code. So instead we're going to do if let entity equals saved entities dot first where. Then we're going to just open the brackets here, and we're going to refer to $0 dot coin ID is equal to coin dot ID, and then we will open the brackets. And this is the same thing as this in just one line. The $0 is our saved entity. It's just a shorter, more condensed way of writing this. So if this confuses you, you can use this code, but we're going to use the condensed version because we are learning to be expert developers. Let's put a comment here, check if coin is already in portfolio. And then if it is in the portfolio, we need to determine whether or not we are updating the amount or we are deleting it from our portfolio. So here we're going to very simply check if the amount, so the amount we're passing into this function, if it's greater than 0, then obviously we want to update. And we're going to update the entity, which is the entity that we just got from this if let statement. And the amount is going to be our amount. We'll say else. So if the amount is equal to 0 or less than 0, which obviously it's never going to be less than 0, but if it's equal to 0 in our else statement, we're going to call delete, and then we're going to delete that entity from our portfolio. All right, and then if we can't find this entity in our saved entities, we'll say else, and that means it's going to be a new entity. So then we will add, and we will add our coin with the amount. All right, so we have our handy dandy function here, and this is going to be the only function that we call from somewhere else in our app. The last thing we need to do here is actually get the portfolio when we initialize this class. So in our init, we loaded the persistent stores, and right after we did that, let's call get portfolio. We actually need to call self.getPortfolio. All right, so now we have our whole core data service set up and running, and this is all the logic we're going to add for updating core data. It's pretty condensed, it's pretty short and sweet. If you followed the SwiftUI Continue Learning playlist, you should be well aware of how this all works. This is not very complex. We just now need to add this portfolio data service to our app. And since we are on the portfolio view, which is using the home view model, let's add it in our home view model. So underneath the market data service, let's add a private let, and let's call this portfolio data service. We'll set it equal to a portfolio data service. All right, guys, this is not rocket science. We're following the same structure throughout our app. We're keeping everything organized. We're just adding multiple, services to route different kinds of data into our app. And now once we initialize this right here with the open close parentheses, it's going to run all of that init code. So it's going to create, it's going to find the container, it's going to load it, and then it's going to get the portfolio. And after it gets the portfolio, it is going to, in our get portfolio, it's going to update our saved entities. And that's this array up here. And so all we need to do in our app now is subscribe to this publisher. So if we subscribe to this, we'll be able to get all of the entities in this array. So going back to our home view model, we're going to go down to our add subscribers. We have one that updates the all coins array. We have one that updates the market data, and let's create one more that updates the portfolio coins. And that's the portfolio coins up here, this publisher. All right. It's going to be the same structure kind of as this publisher, but we're going to walk through all the steps, of course. And just like this publisher, there's actually two things we want to subscribe to. So we're going to subscribe, and then we're going to combine it with another subscriber. So as I mentioned, and as you probably realized, the portfolio entities are different from the coin models that we have in our app. So when we get these portfolio entities, we want to then convert them into coin models so that we can put our coin models on the portfolio coins array up here. So because of that, we need to subscribe to something that has all of the coins in our app, as well as the portfolio entities. And so there's two possible places I could subscribe to. I could subscribe to this all coins directly, which will always have the coins in our app, or I could subscribe to the coindataservice.allcoins. And if you are remembering correctly, this coindataservice.allcoins is going to have all of the coins 100% of the time, but this all coins is actually filtered. So it takes this array and then it filters it and then it adds it to the all coins. And so when we are on that view in our app on this right side, we still have this search bar showing up here. So if I start typing something and we have our portfolio here, I actually want the portfolio to filter as well. So what makes more sense for us to do is actually subscribe to the filtered all coins rather than the coindataservice.altcoins. So here we're going to subscribe to the array at the top here that should be already filtered. So we'll here we'll call all coins, and we actually need the money sign all coins. And we're going to combine it with another subscriber. So we'll say combine latest. And we're going to combine it with our portfolio data service dot saved entities with the money sign. So here we are taking the latest array of filtered coins, which are type CoinModel, and as well as the saved entities, which are type portfolio entity. And then we need to convert them into an array of portfolio coins, which are type CoinModel. So here, let's call map, and we will transform them. When we get two outputs, so the first output is going to be coin models, and the second output is going to be portfolio entities. Right, so the coin models is coming from our all coins, and the portfolio entity is coming from our saved entities. And we want this to return an array of coin model. So what we're going to do is basically look through all of the coins in this coin models, and we're going to see if any of those coins are included in our portfolio entities array here, and then we're going to use that. So here we're going to call coin models, and we'll call .compact map. And I'm using compact map here because the result from this compact map is optional. And that's because there's going to be a bunch of coins in this coins models array that we actually don't need to use, because we only need to use the coins that are actually included in our portfolio. So for coins that are not included in the portfolio, we're going to return a nil out of here, and we'll remove them from the final array. So let's transform them. I'm going to click enter here. This will be the current coin, and we want this to also return a coin model. And we're going to check if this coin is included in our portfolio entity. So we're going to say, here we're going to say guard let entity equals the portfolio entities dot first where. And we're going to look for the first portfolio entity that has the same ID as this coin. So I showed you the shorthand how to do this before. We're going to open the brackets. We're going to use the money sign 0 dot coin ID. We're going to look for the first one where the coin ID is equal to this coin dot ID. That's this coin here. And then we'll say else. So if we can't find this entity, because we're in a guard statement, so if we can't find this entity, we're going to return nil. That means we don't have this coin in our portfolio, and that's why we're using the optional compact map, because we can return nil out of here and remove it from our final array. But if we do get this entity, we then are going to return the coin, but we don't want to just return the coin as is. We want to return the coin with the amount that is in our entity. So remember, our entity is actually storing the amount of coins that we have in our saved portfolio. So here we're going to return coin dot, and we're going to call update holdings. And if I right click on this and jump to the definition, this was a function we set up way back at the beginning of the course. When we created our coin model, we added this function to update the holdings. It will basically take the current coin and return a new coin with all of these same values, except it is updating the current holdings to a new amount. So that's exactly what we want for right here. So we're going to call coin.updateHoldings, and we're going to give it the amount that we're getting from the saved entity. So here we'll add entity.amount. All right, so after we call this compact map, it's going to return an array of coin models here. So down here, we're going to get an array of coin models, and we'll call .sync. We're not going to worry about the errors, so we'll just use the receive value here. Press enter. This will be returned coins. And we will make this weak self, and we will set the array at the top here, the portfolio coins, equal to the result. So we'll say self.portfolio coins equals to the returned coins. And finally, we need to store this somewhere. That's why we're getting this warning here. So we will call .store, and we'll store it in our cancellables, just like we did with the other subscribers. All right, so we have our subscriber set up to listen to core data, but we actually have not had any code yet to actually update the core data. So underneath this add subscribers function, let's create one more function. We'll say func update portfolio, open close parentheses, open the brackets. And in this function, we're going to call our portfolio data service and call .update portfolio. This is the function we made a couple minutes ago. And obviously we need to pass in a coin of type CoinModel and an amount. So let's put those as parameters to this function as well. And we'll pass in our coin and we'll pass in our amount. And remember, this update portfolio is going to determine whether we are adding, updating, or deleting those coins from our portfolio. So all we need to do is call this function now from the view. All right, so I'm going to jump back to our portfolio view that we set up in the last video. And we created a function already to save when we click on the save button. And I think it's down here. So when we click the save button, we are going to get the coin, and then we need to save it to the portfolio. So here, all we're going to do is call vm.updatePortfolio. And we're going to pass in our coin, and we actually need the amount as well. And the amount, remember, is going to be typed in this amount holding section. And the value we're typing into this text field is a string, but we know they're typing in numbers, so we need to convert the string to a double. So in our guard statement, let's say guard let coin equals selected coin, comma, and we're going to say let amount equals a double of the quantity text. So the quantity text, remember, is what is binding to that text field. And this amount, let's then just pass it in here. And that should be all the logic to actually save, update, delete from core data. So I just love how our view literally has one line of code, and it does all of the magic in the view model and the portfolio data service. The view is not clogged up with all of the core data logic. That's why we're not using the @fetch request, because all that logic is now layered into our app nice and neat. It's not in the view. Let's build and run this and see if we can save to core data. And we have a bunch of printouts when we made the core data class, so hopefully if anything goes wrong, you should get some printouts. I am going to jump to our portfolio tab, click the plus, and let's just add something. I'm kind of nervous here. Let's see if it works. Let's search. We just have ETH. Let's do that. And let's do maybe 0.5. So at 3,800, 0.5 should be 1,900. And if we click save, we get the check, and hopefully that's saved to our portfolio. And we're going to find out really shortly. Let's just press the X button. And voila, it was like magic, I know. Our portfolio tab has automatically been updated with our new portfolio. And we can see our holdings has 0.5 ETH, and we can see the amount that is worth. I think that is magic. I assume some of you are pretty shocked now because we just wrote all of that code and then this just like automatically popped up, which is awesome. But that's why we're using these publishers and subscribers, because as soon as we updated that in the portfolio data service, as soon as we updated those saved entities, that was being subscribed to in our view model. So it updated and pushed back out to our view automatically. So let's play around with this, just make sure it works quick. We're going to press the plus again. Let's add another one. Let's do BNB. We'll add maybe, let's do 10, $6,000. Click save. We get the check. Scroll down. This looks good. This looks like it's still working. Let's try to remove the ETH from our portfolio. So it's got 50 right now. Let's click the plus. Let's click on ETH. And the first thing I notice is that we have 0.5 in our portfolio, yet the amount holding is still blank here. So when we already have an item in our portfolio, we actually should show the amount we have here. This should not be blank. So let's go to the code where we are actually clicking and selecting this coin. And that is, where is that? It's a tap gesture on our logo view. We have a tap gesture that just sets the selected coin equal to this coin. And let's create a function underneath this. Let's create a private func. We'll say update selected coin. Open close parentheses, open the brackets. And here we're going to pass in a coin of type CoinModel. So we'll call this instead of just setting this, we'll call update selected coin, and we'll pass in the coin. And here let's do a little bit of logic. First, obviously, let's set the selected coin equal to that coin like we just had. But now let's see if this selected coin is included in our portfolio array. And if it is, let's get the holdings from the amount that's in the portfolio. So let's first see if this coin is in our portfolio. So we'll say let portfolio coin equals the vm.portfolio coins .first where. You guys should be getting used to this by now. We're going to look for the first coin where the ID is equal to the coin ID here. And the portfolio coins is an array of CoinModel. So we're going to look for the first coin where the ID is equal to the coin ID of this coin. So I'm going to do it the shorthand way. I hope this is not confusing you guys. I'm assuming that you've been following my courses if you're watching this one. And let's open the brackets to $0.ID is equal to the coin.id. Alright, so this is going to return us the first coin where the ID is equal to the ID. So if this is true, we know this coin is actually in our portfolio. So this returns us an optional coin model. So let's actually put it in an if let statement. So we'll say if let this, and if we get this portfolio coin, let's then say let amount equal to the portfolio coin dot current holdings. So this current holdings is what we just updated before in our view model. So this should be the amount of these coins that we actually have in our portfolio. And then we'll open the brackets. So if we can get this amount, let's then put that amount in this text field. And this text field is connected to the quantity text, which is of type string. So down here we'll say quantity text, and we'll set it equal to the amount. The amount, of course, is a double, so we need to convert it to a string. So we'll do the quotes, backslash, open close parentheses, pass in the amount. And then we'll just say else. And if we can't find the coin and we don't have an amount, we'll just set the quantity text equal to a blank string. Alright, so let's run the app one more time. And you should notice that when we reran the app, we go to our portfolio, it is actually saving, which is awesome, which is also the magic of core data, because core data saves to the device and it persists. So now this data is now saving forever. We have 0.5 ETH. Let's click the plus, let's click on ETH, and we can see the amount holding is 0.5, which is perfect. Let's try to change that. So let's change it to maybe 5.8. Let's click save. Let's see if it worked. 5.8, perfect. Let's try to remove it now. So let's go back to edit portfolio. Let's click on the ETH. Let's go down and make this 0. We got 0 left in our portfolio. Let's click save. And it's gone. And that worked perfectly, kind of like magic, I know. But that is the power of Combine, subscribing and publishing and subscribing to keep everything in sync across your application. And the very last thing I want to change is that when we do click this plus, I actually want to show, this is just showing all of the coins. I actually want this to start out with the coins in my portfolio and not just every coin here. So like right now my portfolio only has BNB. So if I click this, I want to see just like BNB come up first. So let's go to where this is in our code, which is right here. We have our coin logo list where it's looping on vm.altcoins. And if we are not searching, let's show the portfolio instead of altcoins. So here we'll say vm.searchText.isEmpty. And if the search text is empty, question mark, we'll show vm.portfoliocoins. Otherwise, vm.altcoins. To run it one final time. All right, jump over. We have BNB. Let's click it. And now we have our portfolio coins popping up. That's why BNB is popping up here first. We can see that we have 10. And if I start typing something else, all the other coins should start popping up, which is exactly what we were looking for. So let's type in Bitcoin. And now we can see all of the Bitcoins coming up. And as soon as we click the X, it should revert back to our portfolio. Awesome. All right, guys, I did notice that the portfolio value up here is not updating, but that's going to take a little bit of logic, and this video is already getting long, so I'm going to save that for the next video. So thank you guys for watching. We have successfully implemented core data into our app, and our data, our portfolio is persisting, which is awesome. Thank you guys for watching. As always, I'm Nick. This is Swiftful Thinking, and I'll see you in the next video.